Hey everybody, so this is the second installment in our little series on the Chinese wisdom tradition of Daoism. So in our first Daoism video, we talked about Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, the little book that he left behind for us. And we centered on the idea of Tao, the central idea of Daoism. Tao is this Chinese word that means way or path, but it's used to denote ultimate reality, what in the Western traditions gets personified as God. But it's really much more similar to the Vedanta or Hindu idea of Brahman, an impersonal, non-local field of divine intelligence that holds everything together, but without will or intention. It's really, Tao simply means the processes of nature, the order and flow through which everything comes and goes and binds everything together in a meaningful, beautiful wholeness. But as you can hear me struggling to find words, you recall that Tao is ineffable. That is, it cannot be expressed in words or contained even in a concept. So how does Taoism express Tao? One of the most, I think, powerful ways that it does is with an image. The image of yin and yang. We've all seen it, that circle with the two teardrop shapes circling around each other, the dark half and the light half, with the little dots inside of each polarity. So that symbol we refer to as yin and yang. And yin and yang then are the two halves of the whole. In other words, the Tao, the one, as it manifests itself in the world, splits into two, splits into yin and yang. And from yin and yang come the 10,000 things, the myriad of things. In other words, all forms, everything that is composed of yin and yang in various proportions. Sometimes yang is dominant, sometimes yin is dominant. So what do the two terms mean? Well, yin is the dark half of the circle. Yin refers to the qualities of darkness and dampness and emptiness and softness and yielding. And yang refers to all the counterparts of those qualities, lightness and dryness and fullness and hardness and assertiveness. And the two are always together. That's why it's really best not to think of them as opposites, but more as two sides of one thing. The way a coin is one thing, but it has a head side and a tail side. The way one's hand is one thing, but when you're looking at the palm of your hand, the back of your hand is hidden, yet present. And when you're looking at the back of your hand, the palm of your hand is hidden, but present. So yin and yang are always together, even though one appears to be dominant and another subordinate. And all of reality then is the interchange of these two things. Think high tide, low tide, daytime, nighttime, inhaling, exhaling. All of the processes of nature are circular, are circulatory, like the blood through the body, like the migration of the whales down the coast and back, and on and on and on. So what yin and yang help us do is re-examine our understanding of strength and effectiveness. We're so used to thinking of yang, assertiveness and rigidity as how you get stuff done. But yin is just as powerful as yang. And the Tao Te Ching really focuses on yin. It tries to remind us that we have forgotten the power of yin, the power of patience, of emptiness, of waiting, of leaving space. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is silence. And little images throughout the Tao Te Ching make this clear. There's a passage about, the blade of grass is mightier than the giant oak, because the giant oak tree is yang, it's hard, it's rigid, and when the hard wind blows, it just falls over. But a little blade of grass is soft and it lets the wind pass. Its flexibility, its fluidity, its receptivity is a powerful stance in the world. Maybe we could learn from that about how we can be stronger by being softer, by letting happen what is happening. There's a wonderful line in the Daoist, don't over sharpen the blade. Don't over sharpen the blade. The Daoist is packed with these little everyday kitchen table metaphors. Think about it. If you're slicing tomatoes, you like a sharp knife. A dull knife, it doesn't even penetrate the skin. So a sharp knife cuts nice tomato slices. So you think, well, I'll make it even sharper. But what happens when you make a knife too sharp? The blade gets so thin that as soon as it hits the cutting board once, it dulls and you have no edge. In other words, effectiveness is a middle point between not enough and too much. This idea of moderation, not going too far around the circle and turning into the opposite. Like if you want to be a friend to someone, you give them a call once in a while, you have lunch. You don't call them 40 times a day. You don't stalk them. That's gone from being a friend to an enemy. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So don't over sharpen the blade is a nice quick teaching on how to find the middle path between yin and yang, the path to optimal effectiveness. Also wrapped up in this yin and yang idea is an ethical confusion. What about good and bad? You don't see the words good and bad anywhere on the list of qualities of yin and yang. In fact, goodness in Taoism is about balance and equanimity. Badness is about being out of balance and being too extreme in either direction. There is a wonderful old Chinese story about this. There's always a great old story. It's called The Old Farmer. There was an old farmer and his young son who lived in a rural village in ancient China, and they owned one horse. And one day the corral gate got left open and the horse ran away and disappeared into the forest. And the next door neighbor came over to the old farmer's house and he said, "Oh no, this is terrible. What are you going to do? Your horse ran away." And the old farmer said, "Well, who knows what's good or bad." And the next day that horse returned from the forest with 12 wild horses that it had befriended because it was a very charismatic horse. And they all ran into the corral and the corral gate slammed shut. And now the farmer has 13 horses. He's the wealthiest farmer in the whole valley. And the next door neighbor comes running over and says, "You're rich. This is amazingly great, good fortune." And the old farmer said, "Well, who knows what's good or bad." And the next day, the farmer's son is trying to get a bit on one of these wild horses so that he could be trained to work on the farm. And the wild horse threw the boy against the gate and he broke both of his legs. And they bring him in the house and they get the village healer and they set the broken bones. And the neighbor comes running over and he says, "Oh no, your son has broken both of his legs. This is terrible. Who's going to help you bring in the harvest? This is a disaster." And the old farmer says, "Of course, who knows what's good or bad." And the next day, the emperor's cavalry comes riding into the village, conscripting young men for the draft. And they bust into the old farmer's house and they see the son with his broken legs and they leave him. And they go next door to the neighbor's house and they take his son and he's never seen or heard from again. And the old farmer is waiting there at home for the inevitable visit. And the young next door neighbor comes running over and he says, "Oh, they took my son. You are so lucky. Your son broke his legs." And the old farmer said, "Of course, who knows what's good or bad." So with stories like that, we get a glimpse of Daoist wisdom. The old farmer exemplifies this magnanimity, this evenness, that when apparent good fortune falls, it's going to cost you something. You can count on it. You can wait for that. And when bad fortune falls, there is some hidden, unforeseen advantage that is going to come out of this calamity. You can wait for that too. So this is the undulation of yin and yang, of dark and light, of emptiness and fullness. That is how the Tao unfolds itself in the world. You know, here in California, on our driver's license, there's a little box that you check when you fill out the form. Would you like to be an organ donor? And it's a pretty serious question, you know. If we find you dying or dead alongside the road, hey, you're going to be needing those organs because there's a bunch of people on waiting lists dying in hospitals all over America waiting for your liver, your lungs, your heart, etc. So it's a personal decision. You know, I checked the box. I mean, if it's my time to go, I'm not going to need that stuff. And if somebody else needs it, mazel tov. Good. So I saw a story some years ago about a college-age girl, 20-something girl who was driving up to Las Vegas with her friends and for spring break, and she got into a terrible head-on collision on I-15 near Barstow. And the family gets the terrible call, your daughter's been injured, you got to get up here. They race up to the hospital in Barstow, and they see that she has suffered severe brain trauma. There's no recovering. And she's been kept in an induced coma to keep the organs viable because they saw on her license that she was an organ donor. But the family still has to sign the consent forms, and they don't want to think about that. They refuse to consent. And the nurses wait, and they try to convince the family. And the family finally realizes this is what our daughter would have wanted. So they sign the consent form. And the medical teams fly into work, harvesting all the viable organs, tissues, and sinew and ligament. And all the, on the other end, all the recipient teams gather for the surgery of the coming tissues and organs. And in this television show that I was watching about this, they fast forward to a year later, and they gathered all of the families together in a park of the family whose daughter had died and all of the families of the organ recipients. And I'll never forget this one scene, the young mother of the dead girl who lost her beloved daughter. She walks up to this 38-year-old man who had been born with a congenital heart defect. And in his 30s, his heart was failing. He needed a heart transplant. He received that girl's heart. And the mother of the dead girl walks up to this 38-year-old man. They never met. And there's the man with his wife and his two young daughters. And this mother of this dead girl walks up to this man, and she puts her hand on his heart, and she feels her daughter's heart beating inside of him. Her daughter's been dead for a year. And of course, everybody's crying. And I wonder what Lao Tzu would ask. Is it a good thing that girl died, or is it a bad thing that girl died? It's the wrong question, isn't it? It's the wrong question. From the point of view of the Tao, there is no good or bad. There's just exchange. There's that great saying from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus that for man, some things are good, some things are bad. But for God, all things are good. And in this Daoist context, it reminds me of that story of the runaway horse. Who knows what's good or bad? And so as we consider Taoism's rather nuanced approach to the constant coming and going of forms, of good fortune and bad fortune, we are called to the wisdom of magnanimity, of equanimity, of realizing in down times there is some hidden opportunity yet to arise that's being born. And who doesn't need to hear that message in difficult times? So when we get back together on the other side in our next video, we have one more piece of work around Taoism, and that is the question of ethics, or what does Taoism suggest is the best way to live our lives? What is the most effective form of action? And that's what we'll take up in our next video. So I'll see you on the other side.